So, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. I do have to wonder why they didn't call this How to Train Your Dragon 3. The title is already a bit of a mouthful, and adding the subtitle only makes it more so. It's not a big deal or anything, but since they called the second film How to Train Your Dragon 2, I would have thought they'd have kept their numerical titles. I have to say this is the most consistently high quality animated franchise I can think of. They have the same writer, director and music composer for each film. The voice acting is all very good.
Dragon, show yourself.
They did replace one of the voice actors for a secondary character in the third film, but I honestly couldn't tell. It's no understatement to say I'm a huge fan of this film series. Weirdly enough, my two favourite genres in movies are horror and animated family films, which are the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. With both you have to be very deliberate in what you show and what you say, and it's that precision that when done well makes for a scary atmosphere or a concise yet heartwarming story. If you're sloppy with your visuals or script in either genre, you get things like Rings or the Emoji Movie. I guess you could say that about any genre, but I think you have to be a lot more careful with the two I mentioned. You can be pretty loose with your dialogue in an action movie, for example, but you don't have that luxury in a family film. As far as How to Train Your Dragon goes, you really need to see the other films in the franchise before seeing the third installment. If you haven't seen them, then you'll miss out on a lot of the character development and emotional impact of the film. Why would you watch this without watching the previous films anyway? That's like watching The Return of the Jedi without having seen Star Wars or The Empire Strikes Back. You'd be missing a lot. But don't let that put you off watching the third film. Instead, look at it as a glowing recommendation to watch all three films. How to Train Your Dragon 3 has a few callbacks that you'd completely miss if you haven't seen the previous films. I don't want to spoil the specifics of it, so here's a similar example using the Avengers Infinity War film when Loki says they have a Hulk.
We have a Hulk.
It's not just the line he's stolen from Iron Man. The last time we heard that line was in the first Avengers, and Loki subsequently got thrown around like a ragdoll. So Loki's remembered this, and when he says it, the expectation is for the Hulk to appear and beat up all the bad guys. It's more than just what he's saying. The audience expects the Hulk to win based on what happened last time. They do the same thing with How to Train Your Dragon 3, where they bring back lines and it means something more than just the words coming out of their mouths. It's been 5 years since the previous film, so I decided to re-watch the first two recently. It's been a while since I saw the first movie and I was expecting it to look really dated. You know, something similar to how Toy Story 1 or The Incredibles look, but it holds up really well. It's a very well told story in the vein of The Iron Giant. If you replace the robot with the dragon, the basic story is almost identical, which isn't a bad thing at all. At the end of the first film, the characters get what they wanted, so there was a huge risk that a sequel would end up feeling forced. All of the conflict within the village had been resolved, so what they do for the second film is to apply outside pressures and show how the village's new outlook is at odds with the rest of the world. The whole thing feels incredibly organic. It's a perfect sequel. They grow everything naturally, the characters visibly age, their personalities mature, the scope of the story is much larger, the emotional moments are heightened. The second movie wasn't afraid to take risks and they really paid off. The part that always hits me emotionally in the second film isn't the sad parts, but the happy one. The scene where the characters are happy and dancing. I'm just so overjoyed to see these characters that I love being happy themselves. It's great. I did once hear someone say that they thought it was silly that all the adults had Scottish accents, but the younger generation does not. I always took it as a way to show there's more than just a slight disagreement between these characters. There's a huge disconnect between the adults and the children, and I think differing the accents helps demonstrate that. That's what I always took away from it, and I actually think it's quite clever. How to Train Your Dragon 2 missed out on an Oscar for Best Animated Feature to Big Hero 6. I mean, I like Big Hero 6, it's a fun movie, but How to Train Your Dragon 2 is light years ahead. To be honest, the Oscars have been a joke for years now, and the animated category is basically just the Disney Award at this point. I don't really care about award shows like the Oscars, and I'm not sure why a lot of other people do either. There's no conversation about the merits of the films, and I'm never going to interact with the judges. It's just arbitrary voting by a group of people I don't know. With that said, I'm always surprised the How to Train Your Dragon franchise as a whole hasn't collected all the awards. The characters are more developed than most animated films, the story is well told and draws you in emotionally, and the music is outstanding. All three movies have some of the best scores I've ever heard for films. Not just animated films, but all films. It's easily one of my favourite film soundtracks of all time. It has that wonderful fairy tale magic, and then the orchestra swoops in and makes you really feel like you're flying. It's phenomenal. The composer should have got an award for every single film. So at this point I guess the video has been more of a review of the entire franchise rather than specifically How to Train Your Dragon 3. But all of the praise that applies to the first two apply to the third film as well. So it's no secret I enjoyed the third film immensely. The villain is featured quite prominently in the trailers, but he's more of a subplot. The character's dragon-friendly attitude has made them vulnerable to constant attacks from the outside world, so the main story is about how the characters are looking for a new place to live and their emotional journeys as they grow as characters. The film is visually stunning. It looks absolutely beautiful. Not just in terms of how far along digital rendering has come over the years, but the amazing use of colours and designs and all the different effects the film uses to create a certain mood. I have to mention how beautifully shot the film is. All three films are really. The cinematography is amazing, and this is something that often gets overlooked when it comes to animated films. The landscapes are breathtaking and they rival that of The Lord of the Rings. They have battle scenes that really feel like they're taking place on an enormous scale. The flying scenes are full of excitement, and combine that with the music and I honestly felt like I was flying. I could really feel the wind rushing through my hair. Well, I would have if I had any.
Chrome Dome.
They do a great job making the dragons, particularly Toothless, feel like real characters while still making them feel like animals. They manage to walk that fine line where they give the animals intelligence but they never come across as human. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is the final film in the franchise, and I'm sad to see it end. All of the movies have been funny, heartwarming, exciting and sad. I've loved every minute of them, including the new one. They've had 3 films spanning over 10 years. Each one has been amazing, and out of all of the films being released this year, How to Train Your Dragon 3 was the one I was looking forward to the most, and it did not disappoint in any way.
Hooray!
I would strongly recommend you watch the third installment, and also the other 2. The characters and the story and the world they live in, it's all brilliant. You should definitely give it a watch. I can't recommend them highly enough.